I checked 1 month and it wasn't one, two, three times, 37 different incidents for a top business. 37. Lesson is you just really have to keep your eyes open. You should have a business with like a family atmosphere, make everybody like family. But the reality is, some families are dysfunctional. You got to set those limits. There's still things you have to have those boundaries.
Welcome to the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast. I'm Steve Phipps, joined by my co-host, Annie Laurie Walters. This is the podcast for B2B CEOs and their marketing teams who want to grow their company, their team, and themselves. And if you've ever felt overwhelmed trying to figure out marketing or frustrated by results that don't match your efforts, you are in the right place. We are here to help simplify your marketing strategy so that you can scale with confidence.
Today's episode is a special one. We're joined by Carolyn Michael-Banks, the founder of A Tour of Possibilities, which is an African-American heritage tour company based here in Memphis.
Now, I've had the privilege of knowing Carolyn for several years, and her story is powerful. What began as a career in tourism has grown into a purpose-driven business, one that is committed to educating, inspiring, and bringing visibility to stories that too often go untold.
She's a business owner, a cultural curator, and a community leader. But more than that, Carolyn is a living example of resilience. You will hear about how she responded when COVID shut down her business, how she kept going when her message made people uncomfortable, and why she never let go of her mission.
So if you're leading a business and wondering how to stay the course, especially when it's hard, this conversation is for you. So let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Carolyn Michael-Banks. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Growth Minded Marketing Podcast. And if you've listened to previous episodes, you know that one of my favorite things to do is to have conversations with business owners and hear the lessons that they've learned, battles that they have fought, and the hard-won wisdom that they are so gracious to share with us here on the podcast. And today's guest is Carolyn Michael-Banks. Now, I've known Carolyn since 2020. And back in 2020, I launched a marketing mastermind group for small business owners. And Carolyn, I didn't know her, but we got introduced and she joined in with that group. And we met for about 4 years. And so over these 4 years, I've had the opportunity to walk alongside and with Carolyn, and I've learned a ton from her. And she has just this fantastic story. Her business is, and I'm not going to steal all her thunder, but her business is not just a business, it's a mission and it's a vehicle for bringing change. So, Carolyn, thank you for being here. Excited to hear your story. If you would just take a couple of minutes and share a little bit about who you are and tell us about your business, A Tour of Possibilities.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. My name is Carolyn Michael-Banks. I am the founder and owner and cultural curator of a company called A Tour of Possibilities. It's an African-American historical tour of Memphis, Tennessee. And as I always like to share, it's not for tourists only. As Steve mentioned, it's a mission I'm on to sharing information with people who probably may know a little bit, may not know anything, but I'm just really concerned about how much we don't know about the history of this country that's never been taught to us. And the other thing I want to say right up front, sometimes I'm finding out that when I talk about or even say the word history, what comes to mind for people, oh, do I have to hear about all this hard stuff? Yeah, you got to hear some hard stuff. But to me, it's the resilience from all the hard stuff that makes a difference, which is why the company is called A Tour of Possibilities.
I love that. And of course, you and I have had numerous conversations. And I love for you that it's not just about history, but it's history with a purpose. It's
Right.
helping educate people and introducing people to stories that many of us have never heard, especially as it relates to African American history. So, Carolyn, talk a little bit about how did you even come to starting a tour of possibilities in the first place?
I started my tourism career in Washington, D.C., what an incredible place to get started. And I had worked for a large sightseeing company, then had the opportunity to work for another sightseeing company. But this one that I worked for was national. And I was very blessed to kind of rise through the ranks relatively quickly, became the general manager of that particular company, and for some reason thought I had some authority. You know how you think you get a promotion, you think you could do some stuff. So I did. And one of the things I chose to do was to add African American history to our script because we didn't have any. So I did the research, got everybody trained. I'm thinking this is the best thing since sliced bread. And I get a call from my CEO who I just knew was going to pat me on the back and say, well done. And his question to me was, what's all this black stuff? And my first reaction was, oh my gosh, was there grease on the seat? Do I need to send somebody a check? I'm a good GM. I can do this. And he simply said, I'm getting calls. I'm getting letters that people are just too uncomfortable with this information. Now, this is 1989, Steve. And here we
Yeah.
are in 2026, and we're still having the same conversation,
Yeah.
which speaks volumes. But I had a chance to, even though I was in DC and the CEO didn't like what I was doing, he gave me an opportunity to go to Savannah, Georgia to open up that operation, which I found interesting since he wasn't on the same page with me, but he knew I knew what I was doing. So I understood that to a point. And I also felt that he thought I was going to say no. He made the offer, and I just think he thought I was going to say no because I love DC. But to his surprise, I said, when do I move? Moved to Savannah, Georgia, did the research, got everybody trained, added African American history because that's what was needed. I was then asked to relocate to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, I'm a boogie down Bronx girl from the Northeast, so moving from Savannah to Philly was not an issue. I didn't mind going back up Northeast and did the same thing, did the research, got everybody trained, added African American history. My goodness, that's because it should be there. And instead of relocating me again, they just decided to downsize me. Now, I got to tell you how devastating that was. But what I didn't realize, it was an answer to a prayer. And the prayer was, if I had some time, Lord, I'd start my own company. And it was kind of as if God said, well, daughter, you have enough time now because you have no job. And so I started a tour of possibilities in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, met the man of my dreams there who lived in Memphis. And that's how I got here to Memphis.
I want to highlight this because even a few minutes ago, your comment about history is the resiliency and learning from the difficulties that those who have gone before us have encountered. And that often, if history is just left as facts and figures and dates, that goes back to having to memorize all that for high school tests. And I think that's a lot of what people think of when they think of history. But when you correlate it to stories and people and what they faced and encountered. And so your experience is also one of resilience in that you faced this loss of a job, something you loved doing.
Mhm.
And as you said, all right, Lord, if I had the time, and sometimes those answers come in ways that we wouldn't choose ourselves. So you meet your husband and you move to Memphis. Now, what year was that you came to Memphis?
2000.
2000. So you've been in Memphis now 26
One,
years.
yes.
Did you start it right away, or what was the time frame for getting ATOP off the ground?
So I lived in Memphis for 14 years before I started ATOP.
Okay.
And what I really find fascinating as I look back on that was for 14 years, I knew this much about the city. I mean, that means zero for those of you who can't see me. So a lot of what I'm doing now is a result of learning myself about this city. And I only knew that Dr. King was assassinated here. I knew that they really like barbecue, and I knew that Elvis still walked the planet. And then I started doing the research and was blown away by the amount of history around almost every corner here, which is what really moved me to go forward. Just before I started doing this business, I was working for the Tennessee Lottery, which is a whole nother conversation. But one of the things that was happening was my clients were retail people in convenience stores. And one day I came home from work and I'm watching the news and someone was shot at a store where I had just left. And I said, Lord, I talked to him a lot, just so you know. I said, Lord, if I got to go out, I really don't want to go out in a convenience store. Help me figure out what it is I need to do that gives me more than just a paycheck.
Yeah.
And doing tours was the only thing I had done as an adult that gave me that kind of, I can't wait to get up and do this every day.
I think that's something is important for us as entrepreneurs and those of us who have founded a business or even stepped into running a business is when we can. It's not always going to line up this way, but having something that we're passionate about and more than just making profit and a good paycheck, but having something that is purpose driven. And that statement's so overused.
But it's so true.
There's a lot of impact there. So you get up and running. Did you start out initially and primarily doing tours that were focused on African American history, or did you add that in? What was the dynamic there?
No, that was going to be my niche. And the reason why was that, and it started, as I mentioned, in DC, that I knew this was a missing. I mean, in every city I went to, I went and did all the tours they had just to, see. And sure enough, each tour I took had a missing. And I know Black folks were doing stuff. But, the only thing they kind of talked about was when we were in music or in sports. And I'm like, our history is so much deeper than us being very good in sports and music. So when I started doing the research, it was intentional that this was going to be a tour that focused on the African American experience. But I'll tell you something else, Steve, that was very interesting in going to all these. And I went to as many, resources that I could get my hands on, especially the free ones. And I went to one, and the person who sat across the desk from me said, "You know what you're missing?" And I'm like, "Oh, please tell me, because, I want to be successful." He said, "First of all, the literature that you don't have one picture of Elvis Presley on here." And I said, "Yeah, that's correct. And that's because that's not my focus. We have several other tours in the city. That's their focus." And I said, "I don't want to be misleading by someone looking at some of my literature and go, oh, yeah, we're going to talk a lot about Elvis." No, I do mention him because he's a part of the history here, but it was not my focus. So I started with that intention and continue to.
So you get started and you start offering these tours. What were the first few years of the business like for you?
One of the lessons I learned, and I'm sure you've heard the phrase, build it and they will come. Field of Dreams, like in 1989, something like that. And it's very motivational, build it and they will come. But what I learned very quickly was just because you built it doesn't mean they're coming. I had to really get a grip of the amount of work it was going to take to really get what I do out in the public, to really get what I do to the most part, to be accepted even by, the group like Memphis Tourism, which is like the head cheerleader for Memphis. And because they were used to selling Memphis a certain way. And what I was offering was not really part of what they talked about. And so that was one of my biggest challenges, number one. Number two, I'm not from Memphis. So there were a number of people in Memphis were like, how could you tell our story and you're not from here? And I had to share with them that sometimes being an outsider, if you will, gives me the opportunity to see things that people who grew up in and live in don't see because it's just too obvious sometimes. So I was able to uncover some of the hidden history that is in plain sight. So that was a challenge and still is.
So fast forward to the last couple of years. Now, obviously, COVID was a big disruption. How did COVID impact your business, and what were some of the things that you did to shift and adapt?
March 13th, 2020, sitting in the office where I sit now, and the tears fell from my face because the word was out, tourism is done. It's not going to happen. You can't be close to people. People aren't traveling. Just, forget it. And I'm like, I'm already into it now, several years. I'm not ready to forget it. And again, my mother's no longer with me, and you'll hear me reference her a lot. And she just simply said, "So, daughter, what's the name of your company?" And I'm like, oh, here she goes. And she said, "I want you to say it out loud." Okay. I said, "It's a tour of possibilities." And she said, "I'll say no more. Figure it out." So what I ended up doing was doing something we called the caravan tour, which allowed my guests to be in their own vehicles, connect via Bluetooth, follow the van through the city, and they could hear and experience the tour almost as if they were with me in the van. They could ask questions, and that really kept us afloat during COVID.
I love that. Now, was that an idea that just came to you? Did you see somebody else doing this? How did you come up with that idea?
So let me tell you how my God works. I just want to share a little bit with you. So 2 years prior to that, Toyota had chosen to do something called Steeped in History, where they would do one city a year and they would invite influencers from that city to do an African American history tour of their city. I happened to be the one selected to do that. And when I'm talking to them and trying to figure it out, I said, I only have a 10-passenger van. They go, oh, no, you won't be in a van. You'll be in a Toyota car. You will have 8 cars following you, and we're going to hook up. And I can't remember what device we used to hook up, but that's what happened 2 years prior. Who would have known something 2 years prior would have given the seed that I needed to do what I did during COVID? Only God, I'm telling you.
I love that from the standpoint of resilience and facing challenges. And some of these challenges are just the natural flow of running a business. And then we have COVID, which is something that disrupted everybody, and how paying attention to the things that we've learned in other contexts or in other situations and being open to, well, how can I use what I've learned and experienced somewhere else? And I think it's important too. I don't talk about this on the podcast, but I'm a certified health coach. And so my wife and I do some things with that on the side. And one of the things we talk to people about as it relates to health is taking time to acknowledge the hard, acknowledging the emotion that comes with that. Like you said, there were tears, and rightfully, but
Mhm.
I love the fact that you didn't stay there. Like you said, it was that reminder, your mom's voice of, what's the name of the company? Like, ah, dang it. It's that place where sometimes it's easier to sit and wallow. I don't think you were wallowing, but sometimes it's easy to stay in that place and it turns into wallowing rather than having to get up and do something different and do something hard.
Yeah.
So I love that story. And like you said, I mean, that's what helped carry you through. So talk a little bit about what's the state of the business right now? What are you seeing? What are some of the things that you've experienced over the last year or so?
Well, one of the things that has happened is I'm choosing to change my focus. You know how sometimes you get an idea, you have a plan, you did all this good stuff, and all of a sudden, like, we need to really rethink this. And so my focus for the first 10 years has been the individual traveler. And I absolutely loved that. I mean, it's great. However, light bulb came on and said, do you realize that the 2 to 3 hours you spend with 2 people, you can do that with groups? And let's not forget, we're in business to make money. And I needed something that would hit my bottom line with more impact.
Yeah.
And 56 people as opposed to 2 or 4 or 10 people immediately can have a change. So that's been the shift that's happening. We're now looking at working with businesses here in Memphis as part of their orientation and onboarding process. So those who come to work for organizations in Memphis will have more of a sense of the city. We're looking at higher educational institutions so that when they get here to start their college years, they have a better understanding of the city. Things like that has been the shift in focus. I mean, I kind of thought about it when I started, but you got to start somewhere. And then it was I'm telling you, it was like this epiphany, like, why is it taking you so long? Because I was really hooked on what I thought I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was fine, but it just wasn't enough. And as business owners, as I said, I go to every possible meeting there is, we're always talking about scaling and da 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 da. And the individual traveler was not going to allow me to do that.
And I love that you're over a decade into the business and you're continuing to look for ways to innovate and try new things, and you're open to that. Is there any part of your story that you haven't shared yet that you think would be really impactful or meaningful for our listeners?
One of the things, and it happened relatively recently, and it was I had to let somebody go who had been with me for over 5 years. And it was kind of the relationship where, I mean, I was really connected. I knew her family issues. I mean, every transportation issues, health issues, you name it, and trusted her with everything I had. Again, my spirit really, I asked my spirit not to whisper, to yell, because I'm getting hard of hearing now. And it was just check on some things. And what I found was as much trust as I had, it not skewed me, but it took me away from really looking at things the way I needed to look at it. Here's an example. Back in, I think it was 2019, I decided to put a GPS system in my van. Initially, it was like, I'm not going to even tell anybody that it's there. No, I want to be transparent. I want them to know that God forbid anything happens, I could get to them if I don't hear from all of that. And then more recently, my spirit was like, just check. Because I wasn't checking. I mean, I trusted this person with my vehicle, right? And Steve, I checked 1 month worth of van usage, and it wasn't one, two, three times, 37 different incidents that the
Wow.
vehicle was used not for a top business. 37. Lesson is you just really have to keep your eyes open. You should have a business with like a family atmosphere, make everybody like family. But the reality is, some families are dysfunctional. You got to set those limits. I mean, I know it leads to people staying longer and all this loyalty and stuff, but there's still things you have to have those boundaries because you can miss things. And I missed some stuff. I take some responsibility for that as well. Because I checked on occasion, but I wasn't checking nighttime. I didn't think it would be 2, 3, 4 in the morning these runs were being made.
Oh, wow.
So after I sat back, because I try and do a lot of reflection on stuff that happens, because I know things happen for reasons, but I sat back and I said, what do I need to learn from this? And that was my lesson, to really keep my eyes open, to be careful. The relationships, because I'm one of those, I'm a touchy-feely huggy, I'm just that kind of person. With all that, though, you have to keep your lines of engagement to a certain level so that you can be aware of what was really obvious, but I just didn't see it until much later.
Yeah. Yeah. I know how much you care for people and how much you love people. And I think for any business owner that has that desire to create a family type environment, that sometimes it is easy to over trust, maybe. Not that we don't trust people, because we do,
Hmm.
but it's also recognizing that there needs to be accountability in place and structure and checks and balances. Because sometimes even good people that we trust have circumstances that they make poor choices.
Yes.
And
Being human has its, drawbacks.
it does. It does. Now, Carolyn, as we start to wrap up,
Wow,
what's
that went fast.
what's one piece of advice that you would share with business owners? Because again, you're bringing in a variety of experience. And so, what's a piece of advice that you give, especially as you think about people growing and scaling and trying to do those kinds of things? What's a piece of advice that you would give to business owners?
Something that I don't hear in a lot of the classes that I take for entrepreneurs, and that is considering journaling your experiences. Because journaling for me does a couple of things. One, it allows me to get things off my chest. It gets me to see it on paper. It gives me a chance to perhaps see things clearly, because things that stay in your head go in circles. And sometimes putting it on paper allows you to see it clearly. Number two, what it has afforded me, was the ability to go back and look at how I got through certain things, especially when things got tough. And not only did it show me how I got through it, but the fact that I got through it. And those are the things that keep me going, because those hills and mountains and everything that we hit, they will continue just because life can life itself.
Uh,
But for me, the journaling experience has given me that opportunity, especially now that I've been on the planet it'll be 69 years this year. There are things that we don't remember that we possibly should. And some of them includes even accomplishments. And one of the things I appreciated so much about our time in our mastermind was we would start off with, our wins. And there were many times I didn't think about the wins I had because I'm so busy into all the other stuff. The other part of it that I have found out is those times that were really difficult, that felt like I wasn't getting through them, knowing that I got through them now gives me the strength to know I'll get through them again, no matter how bad it looked. And as I said, in many of the meetings I go to, I kind of wish someone else had kind of brought it up. I've been journaling not as often as I should. But again, my mother's like, you need to write down because you're going to forget the good stuff and remember the bad stuff. But you really have more good stuff going for you. But if you don't write it down, you won't remember. And just give yourself some grace by being able to look back and see what you have accomplished, good, bad, or indifferent. At least you can see it and then go from there.
That's great advice. Someone who does journal, I know sometimes I love your point about it gives you a record to go back to. And I know another benefit for me is, as you said, sometimes we get all these thoughts and these ideas swirling around in our brains. And as entrepreneurs, our brain doesn't click off at 5 o'clock. Our brain may click on at 5 a.m. or 2 a.m., whatever, whenever it is. And that being a great way to get some clarity by getting those thoughts out and having that record to go back to see, oh, wait, I did. Now that I can look back and even sometimes, well, how did I go through that? What did I learn?
Mhm.
Because we forget quickly. Well, Carolyn, this has been fantastic. And one other thing I wanted to point out, you just commented you are 69. And number one, I knew kind of thereabouts about your age range based on previous conversations. And I think if anybody ever met you, they would go, no, no. But I love the fact that you're not slowing down. Let me put it this way. Maybe in some capacities, you're like, okay, I'm slowing down a little bit.
Yeah.
But as it relates to your business, well, and again, you see it as a mission to educate people to help improve relationships among people groups, but you're continuing to find new ways. Like you just mentioned, you're taking classes on entrepreneurialism. And I know you, and I know that you are always learning. You're asking good questions because you're wanting to learn more. How can I do this better? So I think just another takeaway that I have of this conversation and others is keep learning, keep asking questions. And, I'm excited to see what happens in your next decade of life and the impact that you're going to have.
Now, I'm also working on my exit strategy, which I think is also important for entrepreneurs to start to look at because
Yes.
I have a lot of work to do. I mean, I now have a list of things I need to have in place. So, with those years has come a little wisdom as to know when it's time, to sit it down and be prepared for that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And for our listeners, thank you for joining us. And as Carolyn said, one of the ways that I work with folks is through coaching. And in the past, that's been masterminds. And so if you or someone in your business needs help with marketing, I would love to have a conversation with you. And you can get in touch with me through our website, wayfindmarketing.com. Again, Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure.
Carolyn's story is such a powerful reminder that your business can be more than a paycheck. It can be a platform, a vehicle for change. And she didn't wait for perfect conditions. She moved forward with passion, purpose, and a whole lot of grit.
A whole lot of grit. And when you are clear on your why, as Carolyn is, it's a whole lot easier to get through the what now. Carolyn didn't just build a tour business. She has built a mission that people could rally around. And even when the road has gotten bumpy, global pandemic, she didn't stop driving. She found a new lane with the caravan tours and kept going.
I love that she turned obstacles into opportunities. And that's what resilience looks like. And it's something every business owner can learn from.
And I love that she was vulnerable in sharing her story because she shared, the difficulties, but she didn't let the emotion of that keep her from moving forward. So for you, our listeners, here's your takeaway. Clarity doesn't come from waiting. It comes from moving, from taking the next step, even if it's small, even if it's scrappy. And if your next step is figuring out your marketing strategy, we've got a simple way to help. Take 5 minutes, head over to wayfindmarketing.com and click the button to take our marketing assessment. This is a free B2B marketing assessment that gives you a clear snapshot of what's working, what's missing, and where to focus next. There's no fluff, there's no filler. This is straightforward insight based on what actually drives growth. And whether you are DIYing your marketing, whether you're leading a small marketing team or maybe working with an agency, this tool will help you spot the gaps, begin aligning your strategy, and make smarter decisions with your time and your budget.
And if Carolyn's story encouraged you, send this episode to another business owner who would love to hear it. Or maybe share it with your team as a reminder of why you do what you do.
Hey, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our podcast. We've got more practical strategies and powerful stories coming your way to help you grow your business, your team, and yourself.
We'll see you next time on the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast.